The BRATVA'S ruin. Part 5. The woman who didn't die. Some debts are not measured in money or blood. Some are measured in years a daughter spent grieving someone who was never gone. Chapter 1. The envelope. It arrived on a Tuesday by ordinary courier, indistinguishable from the dozen other deliveries that came to the estate's gatehouse each week, except that Galena brought it to Sofia personally, in the library, with an expression that had abandoned its usual composure. "This came for you," Galena said, addressed strangely. Sofia looked at the envelope. Heavy cream paper, no return address, and across the front, in a hand she didn't recognize. To Elena Volkov's daughter. Not Sofia Volkov, not Sofia Sokolov, which she had quietly begun using in the 2 weeks since the kitchen, since the yes said twice. Elena Volkov's daughter, a designation that reached backward through her own identity to claim her by her mother's name. She opened it at the desk, carefully, the way she opened things that might matter. Inside, a single photograph, glossy, recent-looking, no note. A woman, mid-50s, standing on a street Sofia didn't recognize, European, cobblestone, autumn trees in the background. The woman was looking slightly away from the camera, caught mid-stride, a scarf around her neck and her dark hair threaded with gray. Sofia's hands went very still. She knew that face. She had spent 22 years keeping it precisely preserved in memory, the specific architecture of a mother's features, the particular way they age in a child's mind because the child stops updating the image at the moment of loss. This woman's face was older than the one in Sofia's memory, but it was unmistakably, structurally, impossibly the same face. Her mother's face. On the back, in the same unfamiliar hand, a date, 2019. 18 years after the accident. Sofia sat with the photograph in her hands for a long time before she called for Nikolai. Chapter 2. What an Nikolai I saw. He came into the library and saw her face before he saw what she was holding, and something in him went immediately, completely still. The specific alertness of a man who has learned to read crisis in another person's posture before words arrive. She held out the photograph without speaking. He took it, looked at it. She watched his face do something she had never seen it do, genuine, unguarded shock. Not the controlled processing he brought to threats, not the careful management of difficult information. His jaw actually went slack, fractionally, before he caught it. "This is not possible," he said. "That's what I thought," Sofia said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "And then I looked at it for 10 minutes and I don't think it's not possible. I think it's her." He turned the photograph over, read the date, looked back at the image. "The death certificate," he said slowly. "The autopsy. I read the file myself during the investigation. There was a body. There was identification. Your father identified her." "My father identified a body in a closed casket 2 days after a car accident, in a state of grief that you yourself described to me as a man becoming smaller," Sofia said. She kept her voice level through an act of will. "I'm not saying the file is wrong. I'm saying I'm looking at a photograph of my mother's face, 18 years after she supposedly died, and I need someone to tell me it's not real before I let myself believe something I am desperately afraid to believe." Nikolai looked at her. "I will find out," he said. "Today, I will use everything I have." "Who sent this?" "I don't know." He turned the envelope over in his other hand. "There's no postmark address, which means it was hand-delivered to a courier service under an alias. It will take time to trace." "Marek is in custody." "Yes," his jaw tightened. "Which means this came from someone else, someone connected to what's left of his organization, or someone entirely separate who has been waiting for an opening." Sofia looked at the photograph again. At the woman's face, turned slightly from the camera, caught in an ordinary moment of walking down an ordinary street in a city Sofia couldn't identify. "If she's alive," Sofia said, and her voice cracked on the word for the first time, "then someone took her from me, 22 years ago, and let me grieve a body that wasn't hers." Nikolai crossed the room and took her face in both hands, the gesture she had made hers, now returned to her in the moment she most needed it. I will find the truth, he said. Whatever it costs, I promise you that. She held on to that promise the way she had once held on to anger, as something solid enough to stand on. Chapter 3. What it meant to wait. The waiting was its own particular cruelty. Andrei's people went to work immediately, tracing the courier alias, the paper stock, the photograph's metadata, the cobblestone street that might be identified through architectural analysis. Nikolai made calls she didn't fully understand to people whose names she didn't recognize. Dr. Kellen in Zurich was asked, discreetly, whether any banking records suggested activity inconsistent with Elena Volkov's death. Sofia worked, because working was the only mechanism she had ever trusted to hold her together. She went to the legal aid office. She argued the Meshchansky case to a satisfactory settlement. She came home each evening and asked the same question and received, for 3 days, the same answer. Nothing yet. On the 4th day, she went to her father. She did not show him the photograph immediately. She sat across from him at his kitchen table. He had been allowed to return home once Marek's arrest made the safe house unnecessary, and she watched his face for the specific signs she had learned to read over the past 2 months, the particular quality of a man holding something back. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to answer it as if my life depends on the truth, because it might. He set down his tea. Sofia. Did you actually see her body? She asked. After the accident, did you see her face with your own eyes before the casket closed? Her father went white. She watched the color leave his face and understood, before he said a single word, that the answer was going to be the one she feared and hoped for in equal, unbearable measure. They told me, he said slowly, that the damage to her. He stopped. His hands were shaking. They told me it would be better if I didn't. They said identification by other means was sufficient. Her belongings, the dental records. He looked up at her, and his eyes were doing something she had never seen them do, a kind of horror dawning in real time. Sofia, why are you asking me this? She put the photograph on the table. He looked at it. He went absolutely still, the way a man goes still when his entire understanding of the last 22 years has just been pulled out from beneath him. His voice broke, that's not possible. That's what everyone keeps saying, Sofia said. I need you to look at it again, Papochka, carefully. Is that her? He picked up the photograph with hands that had gone unsteady. He stared at it for a long, long time. Yes, he said finally in a whisper. God help me, yes, that is Elena. Chapter 4. The Trace. Andrei found the cobblestone street on the 6th day. Riga. Not Vilnius, not anywhere connected to Marek's known operations directly, but close enough, geographically and structurally, that the connection couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. The street was in the old town, a district favored by a particular category of person who valued discretion and old architecture in equal measure. There's more, Andrei said, in the study, with Nikolai and Sofia both present and the specific tension of a man who has found something he is reluctant to deliver. We cross-referenced the photograph's background details, a shop sign visible in the corner, partially obscured. It allowed us to narrow the specific block, and from there, residency records for the building behind her. And, Sofia said, a woman has held a long-term lease on an apartment in that building since 2003, Andrei said, under the name Elena Bruno. Sofia's chest went tight. Bruno. It's not a coincidence, Nikolai said quietly. Marchetti is a family name from Genoa. Bruno is common in the same region. It's the kind of alias a person constructs when they want a name that still feels like home. 2003, Sofia said, 2 years after the accident. Yes. She sat with this, with the architecture of what it meant. That someone had faked her mother's death in 2001, moved her to Riga, given her a new name, and kept her there for what reason, for whose benefit, under what coercion or agreement for 23 years. Is she still there? Sofia asked. Her voice was very quiet. Andrei looked at Nikolai before he answered, which told her the answer mattered enough that the delivery of it had been considered carefully. As of 3 days ago, Andrei said, Yes. Sofia stood up. Then we go to Riga. Chapter 5. The question Nikolai couldn't answer. That night, she found herself unable to sleep, and she found Nikolai equally awake beside her, staring at the ceiling with the particular stillness of a man working through something he hadn't yet decided how to say. "Tell me," she said into the dark. He turned his head. "If she has been alive for 23 years, he said carefully, kept somewhere under a constructed identity, there are only a limited number of reasons that arrangement would exist and persist for that long. Tell me the reasons." She could have arranged it herself, fled a danger so severe that faking her own death, even at the cost of her daughter's grief, seemed like the only way to survive it and protect you by separation. He paused. Or she was taken, held, kept alive for a reason, leverage, knowledge, value, by someone who needed her existence concealed from everyone, including you. Sofia lay very still. Marek. Possibly. Or whoever controlled the original 1985 structure on the SOBOL side before it passed to him. Someone who understood that Elena Marchetti, alive, was worth more than Elena Marchetti, dead, as long as her daughter believed the second. Why would she be worth more alive? Nikolai was quiet for a long moment. Because a dead woman cannot be made to do anything. A living one, held somewhere, with a daughter she loves on the outside, can be controlled completely, with the threat of revealing she still exists, or the threat of harming her if certain things didn't happen. Sofia felt the cold of this settle into her bones. Someone has had a leash on my mother for 23 years, she said, using her existence, her continued safety, as something to hold over someone. Possibly your father, possibly the structure itself, ensuring the account remained untouched. He turned to look at her fully in the dark. I don't know yet, Sofia. I am giving you the architecture of possibilities, not the truth. The truth is in Riga. She closed her eyes. Then we go and find it. Yes, he said, we go. Chapter 6. The apartment in the old town. Riga in late winter had the particular hush of a Baltic city that had survived more occupations and erasures than most cities survive in 1,000 years, and something in its architecture. The narrow medieval streets, the church spires, the cobblestones worn smooth by centuries, felt to Sofia like the appropriate setting for a resurrection she wasn't yet sure she believed in. They did not approach the apartment directly. Andreiquotes people watched the building for a full day first, standard caution, Nikolai explained, in case the situation was a trap rather than a truth. The watching produced nothing alarming. An ordinary residential building, ordinary foot traffic, no surveillance, no unusual security. At 4 p.m. on the second day, a woman left the building. Sofia watched from the car, parked across the narrow street, and felt her entire body go still in a way she had never experienced. A stillness that came from somewhere beneath conscious thought, an animal recognition that arrived before the mind could process or deny it. The woman walked with a slight limp she hadn't had in Sofia's memory. Her hair was more grey than the photograph had shown, pulled back simply. She wore a wool coat and carried a string bag, the kind used for grocery shopping, and she walked toward the corner market with the unhurried rhythm of someone who has lived in the same small radius for a very long time. That's her, Sofia said. Her voice did not sound like her own voice. Sofia. That's her, Nikolai. She had her hand on the door before he could stop her. He caught her arm, not restraining, steadying. If this is a trap, he said quietly, the moment of approach is when it springs. I need 2 minutes to confirm the street is clear. I have waited 23 years, Sofia said. I can give you 2 minutes. She gave him 2 minutes. They were the longest 2 minutes of her life. Then he nodded, and she was out of the car, walking across the cobblestones toward a woman buying vegetables at a market stall, and the woman turned at the sound of footsteps too purposeful to be a stranger's, and looked up, and saw Sofia's face. The string bag fell from her hand. Sofia, the woman said, and her voice, The voice Sofia had spent 22 years trying not to forget and had, despite everything, begun to forget in its precise texture, broke completely on the single syllable of her daughter's name. Chapter 7. Elena. They sat in the small apartment above the old town street, in a kitchen with mismatched chairs and a window that looked out over rooftops, and Sofia looked at her mother across a table for the first time in 22 years and did not know where to begin. Elena, she still went by Elena, even under the constructed surname, even in exile, looked at her daughter with an expression that contained the full collapsed weight of everything she had not been able to do for 2 decades. "I am so sorry," she said. It was the first complete sentence she had managed since the market, since the embrace on the cobblestones that had drawn the attention of half the street, since the walk back to the apartment during which neither of them had been able to speak coherently. "I have rehearsed this conversation for 23 years, and I cannot remember a single word of what I planned to say." "Tell me why," Sofia said. Her voice was raw. "Tell me why you let me believe you were dead." Elena looked at her hands on the table. They were older hands than Sofia remembered, weathered by years Sofia had no access to, no knowledge of, no shared memory of at all. "In 1999, I tried to close the account," Elena said. "You know about the account." "I know everything about the account." "Then you know what I tried to do, and you know it didn't work, because the second party, the SOBOL interest, never agreed." She looked up. "What you may not know is what happened after I sent that letter." Sofia waited. "A man came to see me," Elena said. "Not Marek, this was before Marek inherited the interest. A man representing the organization that held the SOBOL share at the time. He told me that my attempt to dissolve the structure was unwelcome, that the account needed to remain in its suspended state, generating its interest, available as collateral for arrangements I would never be told about." She paused. "I refused. I told him I would pursue the dissolution through legal channels if necessary." "And he threatened you?" "He told me," Elena said very quietly, "that if I continued, you would be the one who paid the price. Not me, you, a 12-year-old girl." Her voice shook. "He was very specific about what that would mean." Sofia felt something cold and old move through her. "I went to your father," Elena continued. "I told him some of it, not everything. I was too afraid to tell him everything, and he told me to stop pursuing the dissolution, to let it go, to protect you by simply not pressing the issue." She looked at her hands again. "I tried. For 2 years I tried to simply let it go. And then, in 2001, the same man came back. He told me that letting it go was not enough. That my continued existence, knowing what I knew, having tried what I'd tried, made me a permanent liability. That the only way to guarantee your safety, truly guarantee it, not just for the moment but for the rest of your life, was for me to disappear completely. To die in every record, in every way that mattered, so that no one would ever again look for an answer from me, threaten me to extract one, or use me as leverage against you." "You faked your own death," Sofia said, "to protect me." "I was given no other choice that left you safe," Elena said. He showed me what would happen to you if I refused. I will not describe what he showed me. I made the only decision available to a mother in that situation." Tears were running freely down her face now, and she did not try to stop them. "I orchestrated the accident. Not real, staged, with the cooperation of someone inside the investigating department who was paid to ensure the closed casket, the identification by other means, the clean closure of the file. I left in the night, 2 weeks before the staged accident, while you were at school. I never said goodbye to you because I could not trust myself to say goodbye and still leave." Sofia sat with this. The architecture of grief she had carried for 22 years, not invalid, not false, but built on a deception designed by her mother's love rather than her mother's death. "Did my father know?" Sofia asked. Elena Volkov's face did something complicated. "Your father knew I was leaving." She said, "He did not know I would fake my death. That was decided 2 days before, when the man returned with a deadline. I told your father I needed to disappear for your safety. I did not tell him how." She paused. I have always believed he suspected, in the years since, that the accident was not what it appeared to be. I think the not knowing for certain was, perversely, easier for him than confirmation would have been. Sofia thought of her father's face when she'd shown him the photograph. The horror that had dawned in real time. Not the horror of a man confirming a suspicion, the horror of a man whose suspicion had just become unbearable fact. He didn't know, Sofia said. Not really, he suspected and chose not to look. Yes, Elena said. I think that is exactly right. Chapter 8, 23 years. Why Riga? Sofia asked. Why this apartment, this name, all these years? 'Cause the man who threatened me had agreed, in exchange for my disappearance, that I would be permitted to live, quietly, somewhere monitored, as long as I made no contact with you or your father and made no further attempt on the account. Elena's voice was steady now, the grief having moved into something more like exhausted clarity. I have been watched in some form almost continuously since 2001. Not imprisoned, I could walk the streets, work small jobs, build a small life, but watched. And reminded, periodically, by whoever held the Sabal interest at any given time, that the arrangement persisted only as long as I remained where I was and who I had become. Marek inherited that arrangement when he absorbed the organization in 2009, Sofia said. Yes, he continued the surveillance. He renewed the threat every few years, just enough to remind me of the cost of breaking it. Elena looked at her daughter. When I heard, through channels I cannot fully explain, the small network of frightened, careful people one builds in 23 years of constrained existence, when I heard that Marek had been arrested, I understood that the arrangement that had bound me for over 2 decades might no longer hold. You didn't send the photograph, Sofia said. It wasn't a question. Someone else did. No, Elena said. I didn't send it. I don't know who did. Something crossed her face. But I have a guess, and I think you should hear it before you decide what you feel about any of this. Sofia waited. There was a woman, Elena said slowly, who worked for the organization that watched me in recent years. She came to check on me periodically, a different person each time, usually, but this one came back more than once. She was kind to me in the specific, careful way of someone operating inside something they hate. She asked me questions about you once, about what I remembered of you as a child. I thought it was idle curiosity at the time. Elena paused. Her name was Dasha. Sofia went very still. Dasha, she repeated. From Riga, a former accountant. You know her. She filed the documentation that led to Marek's arrest, Sofia said slowly, putting the pieces together with the specific dawning clarity of a lawyer recognizing a pattern she had been too close to see. She used a whistleblower provision I wrote myself. She looked at her mother. She must have known about you the entire 18 months she was documenting his operation. She must have decided, when the structure collapsed, that it was finally safe to send the proof that you were alive. She gave you back to me, Elena said, without ever telling either of us directly that she was doing it. Sofia sat with the full weight of this, the strange, distributed mercy of a woman she had never met, who had been quietly watching her mother's captivity for years and had chosen, at the precise moment the structure of fear collapsed, to set a single piece of truth loose into the world and let it find its way home. I need to find her, Sofia said. I need to thank her properly. I would like that very much, Elena said, and reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. Chapter 9. What Nikolai I heard from the stairwell. He had given them privacy, had waited in the stairwell outside the apartment door for the better part of 2 hours, declining Andrei's offer to wait in the car, because some part of him had needed to be close even if he couldn't be present. When Sofia finally came to the door and found him sitting on the bottom step of the narrow stairwell, she understood from his face that he had heard at least some of it through the old building's thin walls. You heard, she said. Some of it, he admitted. Enough. She sat down beside him on the step. She's coming back to Moscow, Sofia said. With us, if that's... Of course, Nikolai said before she could finish the sentence. Whatever she needs, whatever protection, whatever arrangement, whatever life she wants to rebuild. He paused. I will personally ensure that no one, not Marek's remnants, not anyone who ever held that leash, comes near her again. Sofia looked at him. You're not going to ask whether this is real, whether it could be a trap, an elaborate deception. I asked Andrei to verify 3 things while I sat in this stairwell, Nikolai said. Dental records cross-reference from old family records your father retained, a handwriting sample compared to letters your mother wrote before 2001, and a biometric scan with her consent against the original passport photograph from her immigration file in 1987. He held Sofia's gaze. All 3 confirmed. This is not a trap, Sofia. This is your mother. Sofia felt something in her chest finally, completely release. The specific physical sensation of a fear she hadn't fully named giving way to a joy she hadn't let herself fully imagine. You did all of that while sitting on a stairwell, she said. I had 2 hours, he said, and I needed to be certain before I let you build hope on something that might collapse. She looked at him for a long moment, at the man who had watched her for 4 years before she knew his name, who had spent 2 hours verifying a miracle so that she wouldn't have to hold the uncertainty of it alone, who had become, through some combination of choice and circumstance and the specific slow accumulation of trust, the person she most wanted beside her on the worst and best days of her life. Thank you, she said. He took her hand. Go back to her, he said. I'll arrange everything for Moscow, take the time you need. She went back into the apartment, to her mother, and the 2 of them talked until the light outside the window had gone fully dark, and somewhere in that long, unbroken conversation, 22 years of grief began, slowly and incompletely and entirely genuinely, to become something else. Chapter 10, The Return. Elena Volkov came back to Moscow with 1 suitcase and 23 years of carefully hoarded memories, and the estate received her with the kind of quiet, total accommodation that Sofia was coming to understand as Nikolai's particular love language. Not grand gestures, but the complete, unhesitating rearrangement of an entire household around what mattered. Pyotr Volkov came to the estate the evening Elena arrived. Sofia had told him in advance, had given him the news gently, in his own kitchen, watching him absorb across 20 minutes the same revelation that had taken her an entire afternoon in Riga to process. He had wept, not performed grief, actual, complete, decades-delayed weeping, for a wife he had suspected might be alive and had been too afraid to confirm, for a marriage he had failed in ways large and small, for a choice he had made in 2001 to stop looking rather than risk what looking might cost. When he and Elena finally stood in the same room again, in the entry hall of the Sokolov estate, with Sofia and Nikolai a careful distance away, giving them what privacy a witnessed reunion could offer, neither of them spoke for a long time. Pyotr, Elena said finally. I should have looked harder, he said. His voice broke completely. I should have never stopped. You were protecting our daughter, Elena said. The same as I was. We made the same impossible choice from 2 different directions, and it cost us 23 years we will never get back. She reached out and took his hand. I am not here to assign blame, Pyotr. I am here because our daughter built a life extraordinary enough to find me. I would like to spend whatever years remain being grateful for that, instead of grieving what we lost getting here. He looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them that Sofia recognized. Not the restoration of what they'd had before, which was gone and could not be recovered exactly as it was, but the beginning of something new built from the wreckage with open eyes. Chapter 11, DSHA. Sofia found her in Riga, 2 weeks later. Through channels that were now considerably easier to navigate given the formal legal protections the whistleblower provision afforded. Dasha was 31, with the careful, watchful quality of a woman who had spent 2 years living inside a structure built on fear and had only recently begun to remember what it felt like not to flinch at footsteps in a hallway. They met in a small cafe, not far from the apartment, where Elena had spent 23 years. You knew, Sofia said. The whole time you were documenting Marek's operation, you knew my mother was alive. Dasha looked at her coffee. I was assigned to check on her periodically, part of the maintenance of the arrangement, making sure she stayed compliant, stayed hidden, didn't try to contact anyone. She paused. The first time I met her, she asked me very quietly whether her daughter was safe. She had no way of knowing. She had been cut off from any information about you for years at a time. Dasha looked up. I told her I would try to find out. It took me 8 months to learn anything reliable. When I learned you were safe, that you'd built a real life, I went back and told her, even though it was a risk. Why? Because I had a daughter of my own once, Dasha said. Her voice went very quiet. She died when she was 4. Illness, not violence, nothing anyone did. But I understood, watching your mother ask about you, exactly what it costs a person to not know if their child is safe. She looked at Sofia. I couldn't fix what happened to my own daughter. I could do something about your mother's not knowing. Sofia reached across the table and took her hand. You gave me back something I thought was gone forever, she said. I don't have a way to repay that. You already did, Dasha said. You wrote a door into a legal document and left it open for people like me. She smiled, small and real. I walked through it. That felt like enough. Chapter 12. What are humanity? In the weeks that followed, the shape of a new life assembled itself around the Sokolov estate with a quiet, accumulating gravity. Elena took a small set of rooms in the east wing, near the library, and spent her mornings reading and her afternoons slowly, carefully rebuilding a relationship with a daughter who had grown into a woman she was only beginning to know. Pyotr visited 3 times a week, and the visits grew longer, and the conversations grew easier, though neither of them pretended the 23 years could be entirely undone. Sofia split her time between the legal aid office, the formation entity's ongoing work. Dasha, in fact, joined the structure formally within the month, her financial expertise exactly what the operation needed to track the remnants of Marek's fractured Baltic holdings, and the specific, hard-won, daily practice of sitting with her mother and asking the questions 22 years of grief had left unasked. Nikolai watched all of it with the particular attention she had come to know as his deepest form of care. Not intrusive, not performative, simply present, making sure every door that needed to open did, and every threat that might still exist was identified and neutralized before it could reach the fragile new architecture of this reassembled family. One evening, in the library, with the fire going and Elena reading in the chair that had quietly become hers and Sofia and Nikolai in their usual configuration across the room, Sofia looked around at all of it, the improbable, hard-earned, entirely real shape of the life she had built from a debt, a forced marriage, a 4-year obsession, and a war that had nearly cost her everything. And she understood, with the specific clarity that had carried her through every crisis of the past 3 months, that she was no longer the woman who had stood at her father's window, watching a black SUV idle in the snow. She was something else now, something chosen and built and entirely her own. But 300 kilometers north, in a prison cell in Lithuania, Vadim Marek received a visitor he had not expected and had not requested. A man with quiet manners and an expensive coat, who sat across the visitation table and said, without preamble, "Your organization is finished. Your Baltic holdings are being absorbed by people loyal to Sokolov. Everything you built is being dismantled piece by piece." Marek looked at him without expression. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I represent an interest that existed before you," the man said. "Before Sokolov, before even the structure your organization absorbed in 2009. He set a single folder on the table between them. "The original 1985 partnership had 3 parties, Mr. Marek. You inherited one. The Marchetti family held the second, now closed. But there was a third interest, the one that financed the original Baltic import concern before it became what it became. An interest that has remained dormant, patient, and entirely unknown to Nikolai Sokolov and his new wife." Marek's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" The man smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Someone who has been waiting 39 years, he said, "for exactly this moment of chaos, and someone who believes Sofia Volkov, Sokolova now, I understand, is owed a visit, not as an enemy." He stood, buttoning his coat. "As family." End of part 5. The Woman Who Didn't Die, concluded. Cliffhanger: Sofia's mother is alive. The family is rebuilding. The war with Marek is won. But a third party, hidden since 1985, unknown to Marek, unknown to Nikolai, unknown to Sofia herself, has just revealed itself inside a Lithuanian prison cell. A third interest in the original partnership, dormant for 39 years, now stepping forward at the precise moment of maximum vulnerability. And the man who delivered the message did not call himself an enemy. He called himself family, raising a question more devastating than anything Marek ever posed. Who else in Sofia's bloodline has secrets still buried, and what do they want from the daughter who just got her mother back? Part 6. Blood and Inheritance. A stranger arrives at the Sokolov estate claiming a connection to Sofia's family that predates everything she thought she knew. Nikolai must decide whether the price of protecting his wife is worth the war this new threat could bring. And Sofia faces the most personal question yet. How much of her own history remains unknown, even to her?